she is. Yep. All right. Questions, comments, concerns?
Start with rabbis.
Start with Auschwitz.
What? Oh yeah, I want to know about that Auschwitz talk you had.
What?
I did not.
I
thought I was walking into talking to rabbis. Now we're talking about Auschwitz. What? You learn new things every day, huh?
Yeah, sure.
Nazis are gonna start.
Well, it was
Did you hear that joke? Okay.
No, I totally missed it. I got lost in thought there. I don't know. You guys tell me. You know, it's. I keep having these experiences, and other people have been reporting to me also, like conversations with people who like it's very nihilistic. You know, like how do you know there's meaning in life? There is no meaning. I mean, are you guys running into that around town?
Sometimes online. It just...
Yeah. No, so I was playing around with this idea of how oftentimes, you know, when you have those sort of conversations with people where they're making this argument cynically, they're making this argument, you know, that there's no meaning in life, and you know, why care? You know, like come on, like, you know, everything's subjective. You know, just, nobody makes that argument about their pain.
Pain?
Yeah, no one ever makes an argument that their pain is just subjective. The one thing everybody puts meaning in is their own pain. And that got me thinking, that's an interesting observation. You know, what people dispute is, oh, you know, how do you know there's good in the world? Oh, you know, is what we do really matter? But no one ever talks that way about their own pain. So it's like, okay, there's common ground. You and I both agree there's meaning to pain. Interesting. So it got me thinking about, well, you know, taking, you know, after World War II, you know, what the Nuremberg trials represented, you know, the Nazi trials, what they really represented was all of humanity getting together and agreeing. Well, it's hard without the Torah to be able to say what is good. But we can tell you for sure what isn't good. Sadistic enjoyment in causing other people to needlessly suffer. The Nuremberg trials said, humanity took a stand and said, it does not matter who you are, it does not matter what your beliefs are, it does not matter what culture you're from, it doesn't matter who your parents were, and it doesn't matter how sucky your life was. There are certain things that are objectively bad, and you will be punished for it.
But can't you, at the same time, you can measure how bad pain is. Like, some people might think breaking a leg is horrible, and some people may say it's not the worst thing in life. I've broken saying someone could say they broke their leg 3 times already, so it's not that bad for them.
They got used to it. But you're never going to say, yeah, it doesn't matter.
So that's why Nazis, they got desensitized.
There's no this. Well, you know, really, if you want to read a book that'll change your life, read Ordinary Men. The basic gist of the book was about, it was following normal run-of-the-mill German guys who were assigned as police officers for Poland. And they grew up like pre-Nazi era, so they had some humanity left in them. And what the description of their lives was this slow, painful transformation into monsters. And it's not like people make the decision to just be a monster. Like what the book illustrates is that the way they were brought in and what they were told was, okay, look, this is going to be a tough job. It's volunteer. No one has to do this. Knowing you can walk away, okay, now we're going to get to business policing Poland. And they did atrocious stuff. I'm not going to get into the details. But what was just really fascinating were two things that really stuck out. Was number one, you know, every time they would do something atrocious, they were going through transformation. Like they were puking their guts out every time after they did all the stuff they did. Like it was biologically bad.
You're making it sound like a movie because of how like vivid it sounds.
It was a very vivid book.
Well,
until it was almost like that part of their soul turned off. And number two, the thing that kept them doing it was this sense of love and compassion to their friends, because it was like everybody agreed what they were doing was the worst possible inhumanity that anyone could be asked to do. And they saw that it would also, in this weird perverted way, it was also bad to abandon their friends in doing it. So it was like this simultaneous realization, what I'm doing is horrible. How could I not support my friends having to go through that horrible experience?
Alone.
Right, alone.
Oh, it's so weird.
And so it's like that has meaning to it. No, you're confronted with, like I said, Auschwitz, like, you know, the most sadistic suffering you can cause another person, like that has meaning. It's wrong. Humanity says it's wrong. The joke on the Auschwitz sign is "work will set you free." You know, that's wrong, and everyone says it's wrong. Well, if that's wrong, there's got to be an opposite. You know, if you want to know what's good, at the very least is stopping that. At the very least is stopping that.
What did you say? Suffering can have meaning. You said it in better words, though.
Just
People
now,
put meaning in pain.
that I mean that is the point I'm trying to make, is that people always put meaning in pain. So it's like there's no such thing as a nihilist. There's no such thing as a person who really does believe there's no meaning in life. Because if he really believed that, the pain he would be going through, he'd be able to snap his fingers and say, no biggie. But they don't. You know, you read the diaries of, say, the guys who did the Columbine shootings. I mean, like, that's an interesting read right there. And that book, their whole belief in what they were doing, what they were motivated in doing, and why. It's like the world has no meaning, and I'm bringing down as many people as possible to prove it. But in their writings, they're describing such meaningful pain that they were experiencing in their own lives. It's like it's a paradox. It's not even a paradox. It's a contradiction of what they're actually saying. If they really believed there was no meaning, it would be like,
What book is that one?
whatever.
What book was that?
Just look them up online. Look up the Columbine Diaries. So it's kind of a funny way of arguing that there is meaning in life, but I think it's a pretty strong argument to make. And it's approaching the problem backwards. Now that we all agree, we all know, it's like undeniable that pain has meaning. Well, what's the and even more than that, I mean, like, this is some tough stuff. I mean, like, I don't know what the difference between that sort of human suffering is. I don't know what the difference between that and hell is. Like, I think the difference is academic. Like, there ain't much difference. So it's like, that's as bad as it gets. Well, at the very least, the opposite is good. Like, the very least, for sure, the opposite is good. And now
Is it hell for the person inflicting the pain?
I think it's for I mean, that's kind of it. I mean,
because they're so messed up that they think it's good that.
At a certain point, I mean, that's the story with the book I told you about, Ordinary Men.
Yeah.
It's like, that's the end of that story. Like, the only way to stop that sort of self-inflicted pain because you are causing pain to others is to let your soul die and feel nothing. You know, like, that's the transformation. Like, everyone will say that's bad. So like I kind of put it to you as, well, okay, fine. If that's what evil is, if that's what hell literally is, I think that's literally what it is. Well, what's the opposite? It's like stopping that.
But isn't that?
And it's like, and that's, it can get, what I'm saying is like, well, if that's like the bare minimum opposite, it can get better than that. You know, how amazing can life be if it's not just stopping pain? What if there's more? You know, what if there's more than just stopping useless suffering? Like, how far could you go with that? I have no idea.
Isn't that a good thought to have? To think, what if there's more in life than just stopping pain?
Yeah, I think that's a really good. That's exactly what I'm saying. I think it's a really good thought.
Yeah. Do you think because people focus on that too much, they just focus on getting rid of the pain in their life instead of like focusing on the good, which gets rid of the pain too, in a way? Like, people get caught more on the negative side than.
People do. I mean, that part is true. It'll be both. I mean, like, wanting to get rid of something bad and then wanting to replace it with good. I mean, that maximizes effort. That's for sure. You know, like you gotta. It's both sides of the same coin. You know, get rid of suffering, and maybe there's something more. So I don't know, like that's when the girl walked out. I think I freaked her out with all that. How do you know life means something? Well, there's pain. Yeah, that might ruin someone's day. But it's even that is like an interesting thing to kind of ponder, is like, I don't know, maybe you'll find out who that was. I'd be interested to see why she walked out. Because it could be a million and one things. I mean, like, number one, that's just intense, and maybe like I shouldn't have like put that on everybody without knowing my crowd. There were a couple new people there. Like, that was my bad. Okay, so maybe yeah. Someone took out their school was like, oh my gosh, this is what they teach here. Okay, fine. Maybe I messed up.
So it's like, please tell me about pain right now.
But you know, and I'm sure it's probably that. But like, you know, for making this question a little more interesting is, well, there are people who are cynical, you know, like, okay, fine, now we have a great argument. We have a great argument that there is meaning in life. How do we know there's good meaning in life? Because there's bad, and everyone agrees to it, and there's got to be an opposite. Okay, great, we have our theory. But, like, there are people who don't want to give up being cynical. Like, that's their identity. It's not just, I think this is also true, like, there are people who, you know, as soon as you say life has meaning, guess what? Time to take responsibility, everybody. Time to open up the Shulchan Aruch. Like, that's responsibility. Look at me, a similar idea is like, you know, you have people who kind of like try and drag down the Torah, you know, like all of these halachas, you know, all this minutia, you know, like, does God really matter if your Natilas Yadayim cup has a hole? Yeah, because you don't know how bad things can get. Yes, he does, because things get really bad. And the more that you find meaning in the world, it's like it doesn't just protect you from suffering, but that it makes everything meaningful. Like the antidote of pain is looking for meaning in everything. And that doesn't have limit. So it's like, it's not a burden putting on people like, you know, being dumb about Natilas Yadayim cups. It's the exact opposite, is that now that we know everything can have meaning, now look for it. Now find meaning in the fact that, like, maybe the size of a, maybe the size of a walnut hole in your Natilas Yadayim cup will puzzle the cup. I mean, like, that can have meaning. Now it matters. And when something matters, you get detailed about it. I mean, this is like, you know, anytime someone nerds out on something, and they just get too detailed, it's like, well, you know, man, you want me to nerd out, just get me talking about Lord of the Rings or Star Trek, and like we'll be here for a good 10 hours. And I will not stop. Well, it's because it's meaningful. When something is meaningful, it's like every detail matters.
I'm never going to talk about Star Wars ever.
I'm not so into Star Wars. You're safe talking about Star Wars.
Zuko, please. Yeah, we're Federalist Airbender right here, right now. Right here, right now.
So that's the, but even dealing with a cynic, okay, fine, you know, like, putting aside maybe someone's cynical because they don't want to take on responsibility. Well, there's a lot of other reasons why people are cynical.
I mean,
it's a, you know, think of it this way, it's a personality type. You know, it's the way someone identifies themselves as being. Like, identity is super duper duper important. Like, you need to have an identity. The joke in psychology, like, a lot of people think of their identity, you know, I am Yonasan, as though like that's concrete truth. Well, no, like it's a construct of behaviors. My identity is just a bunch of behaviors. It's a patterns of behavior I reproduce. And if I wanted to, I could just do other behaviors. My sense of self is a behavior. But that's kind of a scary thought to present to somebody, because behavior gives stability to life. It's a low resolution map of who you're sitting with, and keep you from freaking out every 2 seconds of who am I, who am I, who am I? I mean, people with borderline personality disorder, for example, like one fundamental problem they have is they really don't know who they are, because they go through too much pain and suffering. Like, the sensitivity they have emotionally is just so powerful. They end up not developing a sense of identity. And they don't have values. They don't know what to strive for. They have a sense of they know they should do something. But like, that's not having an identity. And so if you have someone who's cynical, you know, well, that's an identity. At the very least, they're not lost. So you have to have compassion for that.
Even people with that disorder, is it hard for them to even make small choices as to what food they want.
Unbelievably hard.
Really?
For many people, yes. Not, I mean, there's gradations and there's different. People are different, but like that does come up. You know.
What makes the difference between them and someone who's indecisive? Like, is it just really extreme? Because even indecisive.
The sense of being lost, just like you're lost.
In the form of
like being indecisive is like I have two options and I just don't know which one to do, and you know, like your brain bounces from side to side from the two options. That's okay, and you know we're all indecisive about something, but like being lost is like you're a little 4-year-old kid in a mega mall. You don't know where mom and dad is. You are lost. That's terrifying. And so like having a sense of identity, even though a large part of it is just a bunch of behavioral patterns and is artificial. But by not behaving that way to yourself, like you give yourself stability so you don't just get terrified out of your mind. So like people are cynical for that sort of reason. Is like, well, like, you know, it's better than nothing. And another part of this is like, you know, it's a bit of a kick to the gut to tell somebody who's cynical, yeah, you know, as bad as your life is, it didn't have to be that way. Gosh, that would hurt. You know, maybe if you saw the golden lining, and we've had this experience, you know, I think we've all had this experience in the room where like we all have problems and we share it with somebody, and the guy just like solutionizes to death about like you should have done this and you should have done that, and like, well, I don't want to hear it, you know, and no one wants to hear it. One reason why we don't want to hear it is implicit in being told the solutions, we're implicitly being told we're incompetent, like that hurts. But then there's truth to it too. Like he's right. Like maybe if I would have put 3 hours on my Pongo instead of 1, I wouldn't have got my ticket. Yeah, he's right. Like it's true. Maybe life didn't have to be as painful as what it was. That's painful. You can't just say that to somebody. So it's like, okay, well, the cynic, he's wrong, and to tell him he's wrong point blank like that is probably the worst thing you could do. So how do you approach it? How do you approach believing in there's meaning and being surrounded by people who disagree with you? I had a friend of mine. Today it's become like in vogue for clinicians to go visit the Dalai Lama. And they hang out. Dalai Lama's cool. Likes to smile a lot. And so my friend, he was there, and there was another monk who was there, and they were schmoozing.
Dalai Lama's still alive?
Yep. And yeah, sure, he's still kicking.
He's so zen.
He's so zen. Yeah, good job. And so they're schmoozing, and it happened to be this other monk had been in a Chinese prison camp for a good long while. And the Dalai Lama asked him, you know, well, how did you survive that?
I was cynical.
Now my friend thought the question was, how did you survive being in a prison camp? You know, they're beating you every morning and afternoon. I mean, and so he answered, it was hard, but I was still able to maintain my compassion and love for them. The Dalai Lama was not asking about the physical danger. He was asking, did this experience destroy your soul? How did you save your soul and your humanity? And the response is, it was hard, but I was still able to maintain the love and empathy towards my captors.
There's a documentary of this lady forgiving Hitler.
Of what?
Forgiving Hitler.
Okay.
A Jewish lady?
Mm-hmm. Oh, so yeah. Someone who like concentration camps, and she's saying like for the people who she knew were also survivors, like they like hated her, were so angry at her, like, and
That's a complicated one too. What's the difference between forgiving and compassion? Because they are not the same.
Right.
You know, as soon as we have to take on, there is truth. There is moral truth in this world. There is right and wrong. I mean, sometimes there are things you really can't. You're obligated not to forgive. You know, something like that, you're obligated not to forgive. But that doesn't mean you're obligated to lack compassion. You know, what the devil did baby Hitler have to go through to get to that?
Yeah, he had a messed up childhood.
You know, yeah, right. It's like as soon as you unpacking these people's childhood, it's like, well, still don't like you.
So
but I don't know. Maybe he's a bad painter. I don't know.
And his father beat him. All his siblings died.
Yeah, and honestly, I have no idea.
His
I have
mother
no idea.
hated him.
Yeah, there's a lot of, yeah. And even there, it's like, and then you have the question, well, loads of people who went through the same and worse, and somehow they didn't turn out to be Hitler, like, how did that one work? And so
There's a whole thing on criminology and the minds of how serial killers work, because they're saying they don't get why certain serial killers, it has two different parts to the way their brain is formed and also their childhood, because there was a man who had a similar brain formation as a serial killer, but he had a stable childhood, so he ended up being like a college professor who was studying like criminology, as opposed to, I forgot, it was either Ted Bundy or like one of the other ones. He had like the same exact brain pattern as him. But they just had a childhood.
Did you hear his lecture?
Nope.
He's a cool guy. What's his name? Oh man, yeah, that's a cool. And it's like,
documentary.
But and they kind of left with that question.
You know the guy she's talking about?
Yeah, I know the professor she's talking about. Yeah, he's a cool guy.
Doesn't like something have to get ignited in your brain, like something so traumatic?
There is. I mean, this kind of gets to like, well, why we should be so like we should have compassion and some understanding. Gosh, I don't know.
Wait, how did they measure that guy's?
In the sense that there's so many factors that go into people being messed up. Like you can't explain it. Like there's no psychological tool to explain why people are the way they are. There are tools to get back from hell, but it's really, how do people end up there? That's a good question.
I like that. I'm gonna write that down too.
I always feel like it's just childhood.
But then it's definitely a part of it, and there's genes, and there's childhood, and then that's what happened when you were an adult, and the trauma. I mean, like there's a load. Who knows? But it's kind of like, well, how do we orient ourselves towards that? Number one, there is meaning, there is truth. You can't forgive everything because there are certain things that are objectively bad. The Nuremberg trials prove that to everybody. We had a Torah that dates a little older than the Nuremberg trials that said that, but like humanity caught up, after World War II, that there are some things that are objectively wrong. You might have to
What are some things that you can't forgive?
Right.
Yeah,
like what would be considered?
I think genocide's one of them.
Okay.
That's definitely on the list.
Okay, I'm gonna have to.
Genocide. You don't forget, but that doesn't mean that you don't have compassion for it, and that's tough. How do you not forgive someone and have compassion for them?
I was watching. I can't pronounce it. The photographer of was that word
Muhammad?
No, it's a place.
It's the concentration camp. People who are Spanish. Munch House.
Something else. Yeah, that's
something with an M. That's a weird mom disease.
The other Holocaust?
It's a weird mom disease.
Weird mom disease.
It is a weird mom disease.
What? What's happening?
That's great. I love that. Yeah.
By proxy.
Yeah, that's great.
You try to keep your child sick, so get all the attention.
Oh, did you have a documentary about that recently?
Yeah.
Funny.
The rest.
Yeah.
Weird mom disease.
Anyway, continue.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
That's fun.
That's Munchausen syndrome, right? That's cool. I love that. It's a weird mom disease. But yeah, so that's there you go. Like that's basically like, good luck with that. That's a fair way of guiding yourself through life. There is truth, there is meaning. There are things that are objectively good and bad. There's objectively right and wrong. There's a lot of things that God judges people, and maybe you shouldn't, but you still can't say it's good. Like, you still can't say it's fine, Like, there has to be some level of compassion you have for everybody. And there you go. Genocide is not on the list of things you forgive. I think those are rules for like, man, this is complicated. I mean, like, I don't even want to get into it. I don't want you guys walking out. Like, I'm immediately being confronted with all of the different. I think I mentioned. For a good long while, I was doing a lot of research on psychopaths and like listening to their stories and like how they hurt people. It's like.
And then I got nightmares.
If you don't have a soul. If you don't have, they're really bad. And just like, I don't want to get into the details, but it's like, and so like. Yes, these people have to be dealt with immediately. Like, you can't let this one go. But then like what you're bringing up, at what point in human history, there's going to be a time in the future where we're all going to look at being a psychopath like diabetes, where there's a problem and take medication, you'll be just fine.
We're already kind of looking at
I mean, I can't even imagine hearing those stories of ever relating to someone that evil as being like having diabetes and just have this medication. Take 2 pills and call me in the morning and you'll be just fine. You won't want to rip body parts. Like, okay, great. That's I can't imagine that.
I feel like they got him though.
Yeah.
Heavily sedate them so they can't murder people.
Murder.
But it kind of, like putting these things on the table like that gets back to this, our old friend, paradox is like, well, both are true, You can't forgive and you also have to have compassion. And it's a balancing act. But it's a balancing act we all have to do.
When I was watching that movie, it showed one of the guys who ran the camp. And then they killed him in the same way that he was killing other people.
Yeah.
But it was... And I'm like, yeah, go. Like, is that what you're sort of saying?
I don't even know what to make of that. What do you mean?
You know what I'm talking about? Like, when I saw the guy who inflicted so much pain, yeah, I was thinking like, I mean, there's no way you could judge anyone like to do that, but like, I don't know. Is that fine?
No, maybe you can judge that. They're halachas.
Yeah, because I was wondering like, God.
But yeah, that's
what I was wondering.
That's a tough one. Yeah, I have no idea.
At the same time, like,
I don't know. But it's like the thing. But it's like, but the fact that you don't know, the fact that there's a hiccup, the fact it's like, well, you're rooting for it, but then there's sneaking suspicion. What am I doing to myself that I'm rooting for that? Well, maybe you should root for it. Maybe rooting for. I mean, that's the mitzvah of Amalek. I mean, Amalek is pure evil. Root it out. But then on the other side of things is like, well, when it comes to Amalek, at what point does Judaism advocate genocide? That's a fun question.
Amalek.
Because that's what Amalek is. We commit genocide against Amalek. Well, we only justify that when there are open miracles where God is literally talking to you and the entire nation, and you have verified that you are all not hallucinating. Then and only then do we advocate such behavior. Yes. That's an interesting thought.
Yeah.
Are you hallucinating?
Sir, yes, sir.
Then I cannot advocate.
Where's come up the mountain, Wishla? Let's go get the fire. No, God called him Moshe. Moshe, like, come on. No, you're walking slow. Come to God. They're not like that joke. Maybe I'm comfortable.
Anyway.
Come on.
I'm just gonna still say it. Okay.
I won't stop until someone tells me to stop.
Please stop. Anyway, Rabbi, please continue.
That's what I got. That was my. So, what do you guys think? Is that?
Honestly,
I can listen to this type of talks all day long.
No one walked out.
Not one person.
Yeah. In fact, we encourage it.
Yeah, we encourage this kind of talk.
We're like, please.
Wait, would it be bad if most of what I got from this class is what if there's more in life than just stopping pain? Because the rest maybe is just too hard for me to, actually internalize.
That's good. That right there.
What will it cost you?
Whatever.
But I feel like that's whole America's thing. It's just like, just the pursuit of happiness. Just, that's the goal, just to be happy.
Well, what's happy? I mean, I'm definitely not saying be happy.
Right.
Like, meaning is not happiness. They are not. They're not the same on any level.
I feel like when people find meaning, it's easier for them to find happiness.
Are we being indoctrinated just to be happy? Is that like?
But he was saying that through pain, you could also find
meaning
in a bad way.
It's like whatever the opposite of that is.
No, because then once you give your pain meaning, it calms you, like it comforts you.
And then you overcome it.
The ordinary men thing was that like they found meaning in uplifting their friends by doing their bad stuff.
Yes.
Yeah, that's weird.
Yeah.
Isn't that weird?
It's like very.
It's like the
very
bond.
uncommon.
So that's how.
Once.
So you can bond even over like.
I could understand it by not going through it. Like I understand like.
I mean, even that point alone is like you start to see that meaning is something which is very flexible. I don't want to say flexible, and it demands there to be a system that almost like, well, meaning could be anything. You need to have some sort of like filter to order meaning. Because if something like that sadistic could be meaningful, that should give everybody pause. It's like, really? You find meaning in that? Meaning is that flexible. And so, like, having this obsessive compulsive need to outline halacha is really, I think, in many ways, is a counter to how flexible meaning can be. Because if finding that sort of meaning, there's a weird beauty to that, but like, no, that's too weird. Like you don't want to fall into that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like people could also find meaning, I guess, in like cheating on their spouse. Like the meaning they get from that is the pleasure of doing something bad.
Well, usually cheating is because you live in a loveless relationship. That's usually what it is. It has nothing to do with physicality whatsoever. People cheat on their spouse because for the past 10 years they haven't been talking to each other.
Yeah, so they find meaning in a different place.
Right. So it's like they find someone who actually wants to talk to them, and that is meaningful. But how terrifying is it that discovering meaning under those circumstances? But how terrifying is it to find meaning under those circumstances?
Yeah.
It's like finding meaning and genuine, like meaning that feels uplifting in something which is wrong. So, I mean, the Torah comes along and says, okay, we have to sort out this whole meaning thing because you don't want it to be that flexible. You want it to be able to be something which is not just meaningful in this moment, but is self-sustaining. And not just self-sustaining in your life, but for every moment of your life. And for an entire civilization, for thousands and thousands of years. That's the sort of meaning we want to develop.
So is that why you're saying it's dangerous to choose meaning in anything?
You have to be careful.
Yeah.
Because is this meaning going to be something that is temporary, or is it meaningful in a stone sort of sense? Like it is a rock. It will exist, and it doesn't matter when, how, or why. That it is.
Like Netflix.
I love
What do you mean?
class.
Like watching Netflix.
I know.
It could be
like,
the stone,
counteracts.
and it keeps someone. It gives them a false sense of peace, I guess.
Sorry. You just said it on colors.
Like, do you understand that?
What do you mean?
Because you were saying some
Yeah.
bad things could be like a stone, I guess, and I'm just thinking of laziness and.
Well, I'm saying that meaning should be a stone in the sense that it's timeless. It's not just something is meaningful now, but it has to be meaningful now, tomorrow, yesterday. That's how you measure what meaning is.
Oh.
And that whatever is meaningful has to stand up in the sense of it is good for people. All people. And that's what I'm saying. Like my argument is, my argument is, that's the Torah. That by being so obsessed with outlining in detail meaning, well, that's really outlining a map that has actually served people for thousands of years and will continue to do so. It's like that. It's kind of in one sense.
It sounds like
yeah.
objective meaning.
It is objective meaning,
Okay.
but that's what makes it objective. It is timeless. Yeah.
If you want something to have meaning and you don't have it, could you force it, like, to make it feel like you have it from
What do you mean?
let's say in Judaism you want something to be meaningful, like a mitzvah, and it's really not, and you want to force yourself to find the meaning in it. Is it possible to either, I feel like you could instill it in yourself, but is it possible to not do that also?
I get your question.
Could you instill it as if you were born with
I
it?
get what your question is. I think a couple different angles on this one is like meaning is Gemara Shabbos talks about the why was it so praiseworthy when the Jewish people said Na'aseh v'nishma, that thousands of Malachim come and putting 2 crowns on the Jewish people. Na'aseh v'nishma, I will do and then I will hear. And I think what it was even like the way that Rabbi Yonasan Ben Levi talks about that medrash is almost like how did the Jewish people discover the secret only that Malachim know? It's like, okay, that's very interesting. Well, yeah, okay, what is the secret? And I think it's something like through action, we discover meaning. That meaning is so complex. It's not something you can be told, although that's a part of it. It's not something that you read, although it's a part of it. It's something that, every sense has to experience. That's complicated. And so if something is not making, if you don't sense meaning in something, chances are you haven't done it enough. Meaning, and I don't mean like in this sort of like habitual sort of way. It's, well, maybe you haven't done enough, meaning you have to do it for 40 years. Because, listen, whoever you are, you ain't going to be who you are 40 years from now. Like it might be that the meaning of whatever it is you're doing only reveals itself when you're 40. Only reveals itself when you become a parent. And you see that this meaning you've ingrained in yourself and you didn't really think it mattered much, all of a sudden when you have kids, like, oh, okay, I got it. I mean, I've had that experience a bunch of times,
When someone has kids, they always call their parents, like, listen,
I'm sorry,
get you now. I apologize.
My bad.
In different things, in different levels, it's just like, oh, okay, well, that me as a single adult and me as a married guy and, I'm independent, I think for myself and my personality, like, well, maybe I won't appreciate it, but I see how this works for my kids. Oh, it's good I had that. It's good I was able to reveal that truth to them, even though I didn't appreciate it. So part of it is like doing it and not just doing it. Again, it's not a habit. It's like you're doing it. Eventually, the meaning is revealed to you. The flip side of that is that meaning is not in a book. Meaning's not something people can tell you, although they need to. Like, you do have to have conversations like this. We have to talk about these sorts of things because this is one step on the journey of discovering meaning. It's one way of opening doors to meaning. I might say things you never thought of before. That's great. So go through that. I said something new. It's a door that's open. To go through that and see if you can live whatever I said. But it's like you can't have someone tell you wisdom and then all of a sudden you're wise. Right. So it might also just be, if something isn't making sense, again, well, it might just be someone's telling you it. It's only been words.
Right.
Yeah.
They say like Shabbos, like you could tell someone why Shabbos is meaningful, but until they do it, you can't grasp it.
Yeah. So I don't know. I hope that's helpful, but it's or it's only meaningful in context. Like I don't know if here's an idea. I don't know if it's true or not, but I don't know if a single mitzvah is meaningful in of itself. It might actually be all mitzvahs are meaningful because, yes, it's meaningful, but it's meaningful because it's a part of something. That could also be. So, like, well, maybe this one thing doesn't mean anything to you. And fair enough. I mean, like, you're entitled to not be interested in stuff. But it might be, like, that's the bolt holding together the screw that if you just let that one fall off, the whole thing falls apart. It could be that way also. What would Judaism look like if the only mitzvah was learning and not doing? That would be weird. Yeah. So, that you have to have both, and so that it might very well be that's true. I don't know. It's a thought I'm playing around with. So don't quote me that it's me Sinai, but it probably is true. So that could also be.
Permission. It's probably
you
true.
just gave me
permission to quote you.
Yeah.
That's what I heard. I don't know, man.
Second sentence.
I never knew you were a convert until now.
Yep. My Aryan good looks.
I figured when you said Iowa.
Yeah, I kind of figured that too.
I thought that was
Iowa.
Iowa.
Two things come out of Iowa: pigs and converts.
Yeah. I saw something. I don't know if you can relate, but it was like your life could be worse. People live in people live in Oklahoma.
Yeah, don't complain about your life. People actually live in Oklahoma.
Yeah, people actually live in Oklahoma.
Got 'em.
Listen.
Everyone in Oklahoma.
I felt that.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone in Oklahoma will be like, wow, you're really gonna come for me like this.
The only time someone came from people.
There's a Nefesh Chaim. He mentions this, that there is such an idea that certain before the Torah was given, you look at the Avos, this idea that the Avos kept the Torah, but then they did certain things that are kind of like prohibited, like marrying sisters, that sort of stuff. So the Nefesh Chaim describes that before Har Sinai was given, there was like a kind of how I was saying, there was a certain flexibility to morality where, a person's shorish and neshama, the root of their neshama, yes, connects to certain things and doesn't connect to certain things. And that for the Avos, their shorish and neshama was such that it was an obligation, it was a moral good that they married sisters. But that when the Torah was given, there was a concretization of morality. That there was a shift from individuals discovering God, where things are more flexible, to a nation displaying God's existence. And that by definition, the community, in a certain sense, being what is displaying God, you have to have rules for everybody. You can't have some people doing this and some people doing that. And so it might actually be there are some halachas that just don't connect to your shorish and neshama. That could be. It could for you and how God created you is meaningless. But what is meaningful in that is you still have to do it because it's not about you, but it's about everybody. And that the meaning held within whatever mitzvah you just don't get, it's for the Jewish people. So that is a true statement. That is something that you can quote me on. That's a Nefesh Chaim.
Okay.
How old were you when you converted?
Started when I was 18.
Wow.
Did you grow up did you grow up with religion at all?
I remember one day, I think it was a freshman year in high school. I don't even know why my mom did this. She pulled me aside and she's like, if anyone asks you, just say you're Lutheran.
Lutheran.
Okay.
Isn't that like is that Catholic? I don't even know.
No, it's a branch of Protestantism. But it was like it was completely random. Never went to church, and it was more like I think she was just afraid of like people thinking like we were a bunch of like wild atheists. And we were religious, like when I was a little kid. My mom tried to read us a little bit of the Bible before going to school. We got up to Parshas Noach. And I think like something about God destroying the world turned her off to reading it to her little 5-year-old kid. She didn't know. Like she really didn't know. It was such a this sort of like to me is sort of like this sort of like beautiful naivety. It was like she never read the book, and so it changed human history. Must be an important book. Let's sit down, kids, and read it. And it's like, and then God destroyed all of humanity. Close of the book. Okay, time for school, and that was it. We never read. We didn't get past that. But
No sequel needed.
No.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So how'd you find your way to Israel?
Took a plane.
No way.
Yes.
Oh, did you go on birthright?
Yeah, that's how I got here. But yeah.
Yes, they are.
And you never went back?
No, never went back.
That was dumb.
Of course they are.
Did the birthright.
But it was your first
And
time
you
in
just left right
Israel?
now. Of course, parents.
Yeah, well, it was after I converted, and then I came here.
And you wanted to stay here?
Not really. Israel kind of grew on me.
True.
So
I
you
don't
weren't
like
planning on
these
staying
things.
here?
It's true.
I was coming to learn, and then go back home.
Did you go to
But-
yeshiva?
Yeah.
Oh wow.
Went to yeshiva, became a rabbi, did the whole, yeah.
You're a
But that's also like kind of getting back to that point of, it wasn't meaningful coming for me to live in Israel initially. Like I had to come and live in Israel to realize why it was meaningful. Like no one could tell me why it was meaningful. I had to experience it, and I did, and I think it is meaningful to live here. But I only know that because I did it.
And
You're
you
gonna
were?
like it.
I'm not gonna like
You
it.
what?
I was getting
I only realized it was meaningful to live in Israel because I did it. Because I lived in Israel, and just through experiencing living in Israel, like I learned wisdom there. It's important for the Jewish people to be together in Israel. Like that's important.
You don't have enough.
All right, we'll call it a day.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.